The morning sun cast golden streaks across the choppy waters as Dr. Mei Chen adjusted her diving equipment on the deck of the research vessel. The salty air filled her lungs as she checked her oxygen levels one last time. This was supposed to be a routine expedition. Another day mapping the underwater cave systems that honeycombed the limestone cliffs along Thailand's coast. Mei had been studying these formations for nearly a decade, but today would change everything she thought she knew about the ocean's ability to keep secrets. Weather report looks good, but we've got about 6 hours before that storm system moves in, said Raj, her research assistant, pointing to dark clouds gathering on the distant horizon. His weathered face showed concern as he handed Mei the sonar equipment. Don't push it today, all right? Mei nodded, though they both knew her reputation for losing track of time underwater. At 42, she was the leading marine archaeologist in the region, known for her meticulous work and stubborn determination. Just the usual sweep. Nothing fancy, she promised, though her eyes sparkled with the excitement that always came before a dive. Besides, I've got Tanya and Olivia with me. Tanya gave a thumbs up as she adjusted her camera equipment. A former Navy diver with arms covered in colorful tattoos, telling stories of her adventures across the world's oceans. Olivia, the youngest of their team, was busy triple-checking the submersible they'd be using to navigate the narrower sections of the cave system. Her engineering background made her particularly protective of the expensive equipment. The team had been mapping this section for the government's environmental preservation project, documenting the delicate ecosystems that thrived in these underwater labyrinths. 3 days in, and they had collected enough data to satisfy their grant requirements, but Mei had insisted on exploring one more branch that showed unusual formations on their preliminary scans. As their small boat approached the cave entrance, Mei felt the familiar tingle of anticipation. Every dive was a journey into another world, a place humans weren't meant to inhabit but could briefly visit. The limestone cliff face rose dramatically from the turquoise water, its surface weathered by centuries of waves and wind. "Comms check," Olivia called out as they prepared to descend in the submersible. The small vessel was cramped with 3 people and their equipment, but it was perfect for navigating the tight spaces they would encounter. "Clear," Mei responded, adjusting her headset. "Getting some weird readings here," Tanya muttered, frowning at the sonar display. "Could be equipment malfunction. The signal's bouncing back strange." Mei leaned over to look. Indeed, the sonar was showing something unusual. A large, solid mass where their maps indicated there should only be water and rock formations. Interference from the cave walls? Olivia suggested, but her voice carried doubt. "Let's find out," Mei said, her curiosity piqued. She guided the submersible into the mouth of the cave, its lights cutting through the darkening. Water, the first 15 minutes of the journey, followed their expected route, navigating through cathedral-like chambers filled with stalactites that had formed over thousands of years when these caves were still above water. Schools of cave-adapted fish with translucent bodies darted away from their lights. Normally, Mei would stop to document these creatures, but today, the mysterious sonar reading pulled her forward. "We should be approaching whatever caused that reading," Tanya said, her voice hushed as if they might disturb something sleeping in the depths. As they rounded a corner in the underwater tunnel, their lights illuminated something that made all 3 women fall silent. At first, Mei's brain couldn't process what she was seeing. It was clearly man-made, metal and glass reflecting their lights, but its presence here was impossible. "Is that?" Olivia whispered, unable to complete her sentence. "A ship," Mei confirmed, her voice barely audible even through the comms. "A cruise ship." The bow of an enormous vessel protruded from what appeared to be a collapsed section of the cave. Its once white hull was now a tapestry of marine growth. Corals, algae, and barnacles had transformed it into something that almost resembled a living reef. But there was no mistaking the distinctive shape and size. This was a modern cruise liner, somehow wedged inside an underwater cave where no such vessel should ever have been able to enter. "This isn't possible," Tanya said, her professional composure cracking. "The entrance to this cave system isn't large enough for a vessel even a tenth this size." Mei guided the submersible closer, her heart pounding. The ship's name was barely visible beneath years of marine growth. Celestial Voyager. "I recognize this ship," Olivia said suddenly. "It disappeared about 15 years ago during a typhoon in the South China Sea. It was all over the news. Nearly 400 people lost. The search had been one of the largest in maritime history, May recalled. For weeks, authorities from 5 countries had combed thousands of square miles of ocean, finding only a few life rafts and pieces of debris. The leading theory had been that the ship had been caught in the typhoon's eyewall, capsized and sunk in deep water. But here it was, somehow entombed in a cave system that should have been physically impossible for it to enter. "We need to document everything," May said, her scientist's mind taking over despite her shock. "Tanya, get as much footage as you can. Olivia, run a structural analysis. I want to know if it's safe to get closer." The submersible's lights played across the ship's hull as they circled it. Most of the vessel was jammed into what appeared to be a larger chamber beyond the collapsed section they were in. The force needed to push something this size through rock was almost unimaginable. "There's a gap there." Tanya pointed to a section where the ship's hull had been torn open, creating a dark maw large enough for their submersible to enter. "We could get inside," May hesitated. Protocol dictated they should return to the surface, report their find, and wait for a properly equipped team. This was potentially a gravesite after all. But scientific curiosity warred with protocol. If they left now, who knew what might happen before they could return? Authorities might seal the site, or worse, commercial salvage operations might destroy valuable evidence. "Oxygen levels?" she asked Olivia. 2 hours at current consumption rates. "And the storm?" "Still 4 hours out according to last check," Tanya confirmed, understanding where May was heading with these questions. "We'll do one pass through that opening," May decided. "Minimal disturbance, no touching anything, just documentation. 20 minutes max, then we head back." The submersible's lights barely penetrated the darkness as they approached the gash in the hull. Years underwater had turned the interior into an alien landscape. Furniture bolted to the floor was now draped in colorful marine growth. Fish darted through what had once been a promenade deck. "This looks like a restaurant area," Olivia observed as they passed through. Tables still set with plates and silverware created an eerie tableau, like a meal interrupted and preserved for eternity. But as they ventured deeper, something odd became apparent. Some areas of the ship showed significantly less marine growth than others. In fact, some corridors appeared almost clean, as if the relentless process of the ocean reclaiming man-made materials had been somehow interrupted. "Look at that door," Tanya said suddenly, pointing her camera at a corridor junction. "It's been forced open recently. Those marks aren't corroded." May felt a chill that had nothing to do with the water temperature. "Recently as in months, not years," Tanya confirmed, zooming in on the metal. "Someone's been here." The implications were staggering. Had there been survivors who somehow lived inside the wreck? Salvagers who'd found it before them? Or was there another explanation? One that defied conventional understanding. As they pushed slightly deeper into the vessel, their lights caught something that made May gasp. Through a partly open door, they could see a room that was completely dry, an air pocket that had survived years underwater. And on a table inside, clearly visible, was a lantern, an active lantern, its light glowing softly. "We need to go back," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "Right now." May nodded, too shocked to argue. As she turned the submersible around, a shadow moved across one of the dry compartments they could see into, too quick to capture on camera, but unmistakably human in shape. The journey back to the surface was made in tense silence, each woman processing what they'd seen. Only when they broke the surface, the bright afternoon sun replacing the darkness of the deep, did they begin to speak again. "We need to report this immediately," May said as they transferred back to the main research vessel. "But we need to be careful about how we present it." "You mean because it sounds completely insane?" Raj asked after they'd told him what they'd found. "Because whatever's down there, whoever's down there, we need to protect them in the site," May clarified. "This isn't just a shipwreck. It's something else entirely." Back on the main vessel, as they secured their equipment and prepared for the return journey, May stared out at the seemingly innocuous cave entrance, now keeping the biggest secret she'd ever encountered. The implications of their discovery were overwhelming, not just for maritime history or archaeology, but potentially for the hundreds of families who had never found closure after their loved ones vanished with the ship. And somewhere in the darkness below, someone or something had lit a lantern, defying all explanation. May knew her life's work had just changed forever. Whatever was inside that impossible shipwreck was waiting to be discovered, and she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how shocking it might be. The news of the Celestial Voyager's discovery spread like wildfire through government channels, though May and her team had been careful to keep it from the public. 3 weeks of bureaucratic battles, emergency permits, and hastily assembled specialized equipment had followed. Now, as dawn broke over the research vessel horizon, which was 4 times the size of their previous boat, May stared at the cave entrance with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "You haven't slept, have you?" asked Raj, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. His eyes were puffy from his own lack of sleep, the excitement of their return keeping everyone on edge. "How could I?" May sipped the bitter liquid gratefully. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that lantern." Their initial report had been met with disbelief, then cautious acceptance once they'd shown the footage. The Thai Maritime Authority had immediately declared the area restricted, and the families of the 342 passengers and crew lost with the Celestial Voyager 15 years ago had been notified that there had been a development, though mercifully, they hadn't been told exactly what, not yet, not until they knew more. The deck buzzed with activity as technicians prepared the remote-operated vehicles, sophisticated underwater drones that would allow them to explore the wreck thoroughly before any human divers risked entry. These ROVs were cutting-edge, equipped with high-definition cameras, powerful lights, and mechanical arms that could manipulate objects if necessary. Dr. Chen, a tall man with graying hair, approached, his government-issued wetsuit marking him as part of the official recovery team. "I'm Director Fuang from Maritime Recovery. My team is ready when you are." May nodded, studying the man's face. He had the look of someone who had seen many disasters, calm, professional, but with a certain weariness around the eyes. "Just to be clear," she said, "my team leads this expedition. We found the Voyager, we know the cave system, and we've spent the last 3 weeks planning this operation." Director Fuang's expression remained neutral. "Of course, but you understand the government's interest in this matter. If there are survivors, May cut in. They've been living in isolation for 15 years. The last thing they need is to be treated like government property." A tense silence fell between them before Fuang nodded slightly. "We're on the same side, Dr. Chen. Let's just find out what's in there." The operation began with a meticulous mapping of the cave entrance and surrounding waters. 3 ROVs were deployed simultaneously, each following pre-programmed paths to update their map of the cave system and assess any changes since their last visit. Tanya operated the main control station, her tattooed arms moving with practiced precision over the controls. "Cave structure looks stable," she reported as the first images came through. "No significant shifts in the rock formations." The control room, set up in the vessel's main cabin, was crowded with specialists, marine engineers, search and rescue experts, medical personnel, and 2 government officials who seemed more interested in their phones than the screens showing the underwater footage. "Approaching the breach point," Tanya announced 2 hours later as the main ROV navigated the now familiar path to where the Celestial Voyager lay entombed in rock. The room fell silent as the vessel came into view on their screens. In the 3 weeks since their discovery, nothing about the ship appeared to have changed. The massive white hull still protruded from the collapsed section of cave, its surface teeming with marine life. The tear in the side that they had briefly explored remained the most accessible entry point. "Let's get inside," May said, looking at Tanya, who nodded and guided the ROV toward the opening. The interior looked much as they remembered, a once luxurious cruise ship transformed by years underwater into something alien and haunting. The ROV's superior lighting system revealed details they had missed before. The ship's decor had been modern and elegant, with what must have been vibrant artwork now faded and water-damaged on the walls. "We're heading toward the air pocket we spotted last time," May explained to the room. Approximately 70 meters in, there was a sealed section with what appeared to be artificial light. Director Puang leaned forward as they approached the area. "If there are people living inside, they must have found a way to generate power. Or they're very conservative with whatever batteries they salvaged," added Olivia, who had been unusually quiet until now. The ROV turned down a corridor that had less marine growth than the surrounding areas, suggesting it might occasionally be dry due to shifting water levels. As they approached the door they had seen before, May felt her heart pounding. "There," Tanya said, zooming the camera in on the door. It was now fully open, unlike during their previous visit when it had been only partially ajar. Beyond the door lay a large room that was indeed completely dry, an air pocket that had somehow been maintained all these years. The lantern was gone, but other signs of habitation were unmistakable. A makeshift bed fashioned from cushions and blankets. Canned food stacked neatly on shelves that had been bolted to the walls. A collection of tools laid out on a table. And most surprisingly, a crude calendar marked on the wall, with thousands of tally marks arranged in groups of 7. "Someone's been counting the days," Olivia whispered. "Can you get the ROV inside that room?" Director Fuang asked, his professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine amazement. Tanya shook her head. "The doorframe is too narrow and we can't risk breaching the air seal. That pocket might be keeping someone alive. Then we need to send in divers," May said firmly. "Today." The preparation for a dive operation took another 3 hours. Safety protocols demanded thorough checks of all equipment, detailed planning of the route, and contingencies for every possible emergency. May would lead the dive team, along with Tanya and 2 specialists from the government recovery unit. As she zipped up her dry suit, May caught sight of her reflection in a small mirror. The woman staring back at her looked older than she remembered, with new lines of tension around her eyes. Whatever they found inside that ship would change lives. Perhaps the lives of survivors who had been presumed dead for 15 years. Certainly the lives of families who had mourned them, and undoubtedly her own life too. "Ready?" asked Tanya, adjusting her oxygen tank. May nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The dive to the ship was tense but uneventful. They followed the path now well established by the ROVs, their powerful lights cutting through the darkness. When they reached the tear in the hull, May led the way inside, moving cautiously to avoid disturbing the delicate balance of this strange underwater tomb. They navigated through corridors that were sometimes fully submerged, sometimes partially flooded with air pockets at the ceiling. The interior of the ship was a maze, made more confusing by the unnatural angle at which it rested. What had once been horizontal hallways now tilted upward or downward at disorienting angles. Finally, they reached the corridor that led to the air-filled room. May signaled for the others to wait as she approached the door. She needed to be careful. If someone was inside, she didn't want to terrify them with the sudden appearance of 4 divers in full gear. She removed her breathing apparatus, keeping it ready to replace quickly if needed, and slowly raised her head into the air pocket at the ceiling of the corridor. The air smelled stale but breathable. "Hello?" she called out, her voice sounding strange after the muffled silence of being underwater. "Is anyone there?" "We're here to help," silence answered her. May pulled herself further up, allowing her shoulders to clear the water. From this vantage point, she could see into the room more clearly. It was larger than it had appeared on the ROV footage, possibly a crew recreation area that had been repurposed. And it was definitely inhabited. Besides the bed and supplies they had already seen, there were clothes hanging on a line strung across one corner, handmade tools and utensils, and even a few books protected in plastic bags. May pulled herself fully into the room, water streaming from her suit as she stood up. The floor was dry, though heavily stained from years of occasional flooding. Her team followed, removing their masks once they confirmed the air was safe to breathe. "Someone's definitely living here," said Tanya, examining the calendar on the wall. "These marks are recent, the ink hasn't faded on these last ones." "But where are they now?" one of the government divers asked, looking around nervously as if expecting someone to jump out from behind the sparse furniture. May moved toward a door on the far side of the room. It had been sealed with what looked like ship caulking and resin, creating a surprisingly effective waterproof barrier. Next to it, scratched into the wall, was a single word: deeper. "They've gone further into the ship," May realized aloud. "This is just an outpost." "There could be larger air pockets deeper in," Tanya suggested. "The ship is wedged at an angle. If enough sections remained sealed after the impact, people could have survived the initial disaster," May finished, "and found a way to live here." She turned to the government divers. "We need to report this and prepare for a more extensive exploration. There are survivors from the Celestial Voyager, and they're still here." 15 years later, as they prepared to leave, May noticed something she had overlooked, a small logbook placed deliberately in the center of the table. She picked it up, careful not to damage the water-stained pages, and opened it. Inside, in neat handwriting, was a message. "To whoever finds us. We are the forgotten ones. We are alive. We are many. We have gone deeper where it's safer. Follow if you must, but come in peace. This is our home now. The message was signed simply, The Survivors of Celestial Voyager, Day 5471. May closed the book carefully and secured it in her waterproof bag. Outside these caves, the world had presumed these people dead for 15 years. Families had grieved and moved on. The question now was not just how to rescue them, but whether, after all this time, they would want to be rescued at all. The logbook's discovery changed everything. What had begun as an archaeological curiosity was now officially a rescue mission, or at least a contact mission. No one knew quite what to call an operation to reach people who had been surviving in an impossible situation for 15 years. As May handed the book to Director Fuang aboard the research vessel, his face showed the struggle between professional detachment and human emotion. 5,471 days, he said quietly, running his finger along the neat handwriting. That's exactly 15 years since the Celestial Voyager disappeared. The control room had transformed into a command center. Government officials spoke in hushed tones on satellite phones. Medical personnel prepared for every possible scenario. Psychologists discussed how to approach people who had been isolated from society for so long. They might not want to leave, said Dr. Watana, the head psychologist, a woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. After this much time, they've created their own society, their own rules. The ship isn't just where they survived, it's their home. May nodded, thinking of the carefully organized supplies, the makeshift calendar, the message they'd left. They called themselves the Forgotten Ones. That tells us something about their mindset. The next expedition would be more extensive, with a team of 8 divers, including May and Tanya. They would follow the survivors' trail deeper into the ship, carrying communication equipment and medical supplies. The plan was to establish contact, assess the situation, and open a dialogue. No one would be forced to leave if they didn't want to. We leave in 3 hours, Director Fuang announced. The dive plan has been approved. Dr. Chen will lead since she has rapport with the site. He looked at May with newfound respect. Let's bring them home if that's what they want. The preparation was meticulous. Each diver would carry emergency air, communication devices, medical kits, and carefully chosen gifts for the survivors. Fresh fruit, chocolates, photographs of the world they'd left behind. They had decided against bringing news of specific people who might have been connected to the passengers, not wanting to risk delivering devastating information about deaths or marriages that had occurred while the survivors were presumed dead. As May zipped up her dry suit for the second time that day, she caught Olivia watching her from across the equipment room. "I wish I was going with you," Olivia said. Her engineering background hadn't qualified her for this specialized dive team. "I need you here," May replied, checking her air gauge. "If anything happens to us, you're the only other person who's seen the inside of that ship. You'll lead the next team." They embraced briefly, an unusual gesture between the normally reserved colleagues. Then May joined the dive team on the launch platform. The journey to the ship felt different this time. May was acutely aware that they might soon be face-to-face with people who had experienced something unprecedented in human history. What would 15 years of isolation in a sunken ship do to a person? To a community? They entered through the now familiar tear in the hull, but instead of heading toward the air pocket they'd already explored, they followed the direction indicated by the scratched word, deeper. This led them down corridors that sloped increasingly downward, deeper into the ship. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, they reached a sealed door similar to the one they'd encountered before. This one had a hand-painted sign, "Airlock, cycle through." May signaled to the team. This appeared to be a crude but effective airlock system created by the survivors. One by one, they cycled through the small chamber, which had been fashioned from what was once a storage closet. Inside, hand pumps allowed water to be drawn out, creating a dry passage to whatever lay beyond. When all 8 divers had passed through and removed their diving gear, they found themselves in a dry corridor that stretched ahead, illuminated by strings of LED lights running along the ceiling. The lights were dim but functional, raising the question of power that had bothered May since their first discovery of the lantern. "They've rigged up some kind of electrical system," whispered one of the government engineers, touching the walls where cables had been neatly attached with makeshift clamps. The corridor led to a larger space that had once been a mid-level dining room. Now it was unrecognizable, transformed into what appeared to be a community center of sorts. Tables had been repurposed and rearranged. Salvaged items from throughout the ship had been carefully organized. And there, standing in the center of the room, were three people watching the dive team with expressions ranging from caution to hope. May stepped forward slowly, her hands visible to show she carried no weapons. "Hello," she said simply. "We found your message." The eldest of the three, a man with a long gray beard and weathered skin, stepped forward. Despite his obvious age, he stood straight, with clear eyes that assessed the newcomers carefully. "We've been waiting a long time," he said, his voice rough as if unused to speaking aloud. "I'm Luis, former chief engineer of the Celestial Voyager. Welcome to what's left of her." The introductions were careful, measured. Besides Luis, there was Vera, once the ship's doctor, now a middle-aged woman with streaks of white in her dark hair and hands that showed years of hard work. The third was Dmitri, who had been just 17 when the ship went down, now a tall man in his early 30s who had grown up entirely within the confines of this sunken world. "There are 17 of us now," Luis explained as he led them deeper into the repurposed ship. "We lost many in the first years. Injuries from the initial impact, illness, the challenges of adapting. But those of us who remained, we found a way." The impossible nature of their survival became clearer as Luis guided them through corridors that sloped downward. The ship had come to rest at nearly a 30-degree angle, wedged into the cave system in such a way that many of the lower decks remained completely dry. The survivors had sealed off flooded sections and created a network of secure areas connected by their homemade airlocks. But the true shock came when Luis led them into what had once been the ship's main engine room. It had been transformed beyond recognition. The massive cruise ship engines were still there, but around them had been built an intricate system unlike anything May had ever seen. "We call it the Heart," Luis said with unmistakable pride. "We didn't build it, we found it. Or rather, it found us." The system was centered around a pulsing blue-green crystal formation that seemed to grow directly from the cave wall that had punctured this section of the ship. Cables and makeshift conduits connected it to the ship's original electrical systems, providing power throughout their living areas. What is it?" asked Director Fuang, his professional demeanor completely abandoned in the face of this impossible sight. "We don't fully understand it ourselves," Vera admitted. "When the typhoon hit us, something strange happened. The ship wasn't just pushed into this cave system, it was pulled. This crystal formation, whatever it is, generated some kind of electromagnetic field that drew us in. At first, we thought it was just a strange mineral formation," Luis continued. "But then we discovered it produces energy, clean, continuous energy. It also somehow purifies the air and water around it. Without it, we would have died within weeks." May approached the crystal cautiously. It hummed at a frequency just below audible range, creating a vibration she could feel in her chest. "This isn't natural," she said quietly. "At least, not naturally occurring on Earth." Luis nodded. "That's the conclusion we came to as well. Something about this cave system, this specific location. It's special. We've had 15 years to study it, and we've only scratched the surface of understanding what it is." Dmitri, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "It heals too. People who stayed near it recovered from injuries that should have been fatal. Some of us haven't aged normally." He rolled up his sleeve to show a scar that pulsed with the same faint blue-green light as the crystal formation. "We're different now." The implications were staggering. Not only had these people survived against impossible odds, but they had discovered something that defied scientific explanation, something that could potentially revolutionize energy production, medicine, perhaps even human longevity. "Do you understand now why some of us might not want to leave?" Luis asked, looking at each member of the dive team. "This isn't just our sanctuary. It's possibly the most important discovery in human history, and we're its guardians." May looked around at the survivors who had gathered to meet them, drawn by the news of outside contact. Their faces showed a complex mix of emotions: hope, fear, curiosity, and something else, a kind of peace that came from having found purpose in their isolation. "The world thinks you died 15 years ago," she said finally. "Your families have mourned. Some have moved on, but now they'll know the truth. What happens next should be your choice. Each of you has the right to decide whether to stay or go. Luis nodded, his weathered face showing gratitude for her understanding. We need time to discuss this among ourselves. But first, tell us, what has happened in the world since we left it? Is it still a place worth returning to? As May and her team began to share 15 years of world events, she realized the true challenge wasn't finding these people or even rescuing them. It was bridging the gap between the world that had continued without them and the extraordinary new reality they had created for themselves deep within the earth. News of the contact spread quickly through the strange underwater community. Over the next few hours, more survivors emerged from various sections of the ship to meet the visitors from the outside world. Each face told a story of hardship, resilience, and adaptation. May found herself overwhelmed by the weight of their experiences, 15 years carved into the lines on their faces, the careful way they moved, the quiet strength in their eyes. The 17 survivors had gathered in what they called the Great Hall, once the ship's main ballroom, now a communal living space with salvaged furniture arranged in a circle. The high ceiling was lined with strings of LED lights powered by the mysterious crystal, giving the room a soft blue-green glow that reminded May of twilight beneath the ocean's surface. We should introduce ourselves properly, Luis said, gesturing to the group. Each of us has a role here. We've had to become a community to survive. Besides Luis, Vera, and Dimitri, whom they'd already met, there was Chen Wei, formerly the ship's navigation officer, now the keeper of their calendar and records. His hands were stained with the ink he made from crushed minerals and plant material found in partially flooded sections, where strange bioluminescent algae grew. Nadia, a former passenger who had been a botanist before the disaster, had created small gardens in several areas of the ship, growing edible plants under artificial light. The crystal changes things, she explained, her accent still carrying traces of her Ukrainian homeland. Plants grow differently near it, faster, stronger. Some develop entirely new properties. There was Ichiro, once the ship's head chef, now their community's provider, who had discovered ways to farm the unusual fish species that thrived in the cave system. Beside him sat his wife Yuki, who had been a passenger on the cruise. They had met during the disaster and found love amid the chaos. As each survivor shared brief details of their role, May noticed a pattern. Those who had been closest to the crystal chamber during the years showed subtle physical differences: hair that retained its color despite their age, unusual vitality, and in some cases, eyes that had developed a faint luminescence matching the crystal's glow. What exactly happened when the ship went down? Director Puong asked once the introductions were complete. The official investigation concluded the celestial Voyager was hit by a rogue wave during the typhoon and sank in deep water. Luis exchanged glances with Vera before responding. We were hit by the typhoon, yes, but what happened next? He paused, searching for words. It wasn't natural. Vera took over, her doctor's precision evident in how she laid out the facts. The ship was damaged but still floating. Then instruments went haywire, compasses spinning, electronics failing. There was a light beneath the waves, drawing us toward this cave system that shouldn't have been navigable for a vessel our size. It was as if the water itself changed consistency, becoming almost gel-like, cushioning the ship as it was pulled into the cave. Many died in the initial impact, added Chen Wei, his voice soft but clear. Others in the weeks that followed. We began with 89 survivors from the original 342 on board. And now you're 17, May said, feeling the weight of the losses they'd endured. Dimitri, who had grown from adolescence to manhood in this strange underwater world, stepped forward. We want to show you our library. It explains things better than we can. The library turned out to be a repurposed crew quarters where every available surface was covered with handmade journals, drawings, and maps. Years of observations, experiments, and experiences carefully documented with handmade paper and ink. The walls were lined with detailed drawings of the crystal formation at different stages of growth. Anatomical sketches of fish species found nowhere in scientific literature, and maps of cave passages that extended far beyond the ship itself. We've been exploring, Luis explained, pointing to the most recent maps. The crystal isn't alone. There's an entire network of formations throughout these caves, all connected somehow. We believe they're part of something much larger and much older than anything human civilization has encountered. May examined the journals with growing amazement. The scientific value of these observations was incalculable. "You've done remarkable work under impossible conditions," she said, genuinely impressed. Luis nodded, accepting the compliment with quiet dignity. "Necessity is a powerful motivator, but there's something more important you need to understand." He pulled out a journal bound in what appeared to be fish skin and opened it to a marked page. "The crystal doesn't just provide power or help things grow. It changes people. The longer we stay here, the more we become something else." The journal contained meticulous medical records kept by Vera over the years. Blood samples showing unusual cellular structures, documented cases of injuries healing at accelerated rates, changes in visual acuity, strength and cognitive function among those with the most exposure to the crystal's energy. "Are you saying it's changing your DNA?" asked one of the government scientists, his professional skepticism warring with the evidence before his eyes. "We think so," Vera confirmed. "But it's selective somehow. Not everyone is affected the same way. Those who are compatible experience beneficial changes. Those who aren't." Her voice trailed off. "Those who aren't compatible become ill," Luis finished for her. "That accounted for many of the losses in our early years. Now, those of us who remain are all compatible to varying degrees." The implications were staggering. May looked at Dmitri, who had grown up entirely under the crystal's influence. "And you've experienced the most changes," she said. It wasn't a question. Dmitri nodded and rolled up his sleeve further than before, revealing an arm where veins pulsed with faint blue-green light. "I can sense the crystal network throughout the caves. I can feel when new formations are growing. Sometimes I dream of places I've never seen deep within the earth." Director Puang had been uncharacteristically quiet, but now he cleared his throat. "This discovery, the scientific and medical implications alone are beyond calculation. The energy production potential could transform how humanity powers itself." He looked directly at Luis. "You understand that once this becomes known, your sanctuary won't remain peaceful for long." "Which is why we've been deliberating about making contact for years," Luis replied. "Some of us wanted to remain hidden forever. Others believed we had a responsibility to share what we've found." He gestured to the dive team. "Your arrival forced our hand." Nadia, the botanist, spoke up. "We've had 15 years to study this gift. We've learned to respect its power, to live in harmony with it. The outside world," she shook her head, "it doesn't have our perspective."